forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger 10. Here's Steve Dace.
Greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger 10. I am Steve Dace. He is my co-host, but of course, never partner, the one and only Aaron McIntyre. And Aaron, it is good to see you, and it's good to have a full slate of college football games to both break down from last week and also to look forward to this week as well.
Yeah, had a lot of fun watching the various games. I was with a buddy of mine on Saturday, so got to watch kind of whip around a few games and then kind of reviewed a few things afterwards. But man, there's nothing quite like the opening Thursday night of college football when you got like 10 games. One or two of them are, really intriguing. Just soaked it all up, love it, and I wish it could be this time of the year all year round.
But then we'd get spoiled and probably wouldn't appreciate it as much.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that doesn't mean the offseason has to be this long, though, okay? There's got to be a happy medium in there somewhere. So let's get to the big five topics we're going to run down this week here on Bigger 10. Let's start with what was the marquee game in our league and the marquee game in the country. One of the marquee games on the docket this year in Ohio State and Notre Dame. You're talking about two top five all-time blue blood programs by any metric, and they're both, at least they were in the preseason polls, rated in the top five as well. Now, I don't know how good Notre Dame is. And according to my numbers, I thought they were one of the more overrated teams in the preseason. Now, that doesn't mean I thought they sucked. I just didn't think they were fifth. I thought they were more like, 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, somewhere in there. So still a very, competent, strong top 25 team. When I look at their offensive personnel as a Michigan fan, I don't know how many of their guys would actually start for us. And they're just not that explosive now on defense. They played their asses off against Ohio State. And if you're a Notre Dame fan, that's what you want to see, right? You bring in a defensive coordinator for your coach. You want to see the guy who comes from one side of the football. You want to see him make his imprint. That's usually a pretty good, statement about the initial installment of a culture of a program. But I think a lot of credit here goes to Ohio State, Aaron, and here's why. Ryan Day doesn't want to win football games this way. And if there's been any criticism of him as a coach, and he's 47-4, so there shouldn't be much, okay? But if there's any criticism of him as a coach at all, it's that he's been too stubborn, but not in the old Woody Hayes 3 yards in a cloud of dust way. It's let's continue to play a video game here when an actual football game has broken out. This time you could see at halftime he figured out, you know what, I'm going to let these guys, if I keep tossing the ball around the yard against these drop zones, I'm going to play right into their hands. So, you know what? You guys want to play soft against us? We're going to not even run our all-star tailback, but we're going to run our bulldozer right at you and win the game another way. And this is maybe the first time that you've seen Ohio State win a game, because it doesn't have to happen very often, but we saw them win a game left-handed, if you will, Aaron, and I think that could pay dividends for them down the line. I
would be very encouraged if I were an Ohio State fan after watching that game. If you're an Ohio State backer, very disappointed that they didn't cover the spread, obviously, but I would be very encouraged for that reason. That's probably second on my list. That, he was very stubborn for most of that game, Ryan Day, but when it mattered the most, he figured out, hey, we're just going to take what they give us, and what they gave them was, like you said, bulldozing tailback, but that leads to what I'd be most encouraged of in the second half, and towards the latter part of the second half as well. I thought you saw a huge amount of growing up from both sides of the line of scrimmage. That's been my main knock on Ohio State, and a lot of people's main knock on Ohio State during the offseason. Could they get better in the trenches? What did Notre Dame gain, like 70-some yards of offense in the second half? That's great defense from Ohio State, obviously. Again, don't know what Notre Dame is made out of. It's clear that they were up on that night, though. So I'd be very encouraged if I were Ohio State. You grew up, I think, a lot, both in the coaching area and on both sides of the line of scrimmage. So for those reasons alone, I would be very encouraged.
I tend to agree with that. And And hey, as a Michigan fan, if we got to go into Columbus here at the end of the year, I'd much rather play a game that looked like Saturday night than Ohio State's typical game. But Ohio State has shown that even if you do drag them down into that mosh pit there, they now can punch back. And so that is something to keep in mind from a Michigan fan perspective as well. So I think that there's maybe more to glean from Ohio State winning a game by double digits against another highly rated program, not playing its style of football, not having Jackson Smith and Jigma at receiver for almost the entire game. A young man, Julian Fleming, another former big-time recruit that they were planning on being one of the replacements for Olave and for Garrett Wilson, also was hurt and didn't play. So I think there's a lot to like about Ohio State. They got dragged into a line of scrimmage game, something they're not relegated and forced to do very often, despite playing in the Big Ten, and they got it done anyway. So yeah, I'd be encouraged if I was a Buckeye fan. So let me go to you now as an Iowa fan. Nice headline there, safety school. I have watched an obscene, really almost shameful amount of college football in my life, whether it's games that are live or, me during the offseason. I'm either in my own DVD stash or on YouTube watching old games from years before I was even born, right? Okay. I have never heard of anything like this. 7 points with 2 safeties and a field goal. I've never heard of it. I'm sure in some leather helmeted era of, cotton stockings and old school Big Ten, there were lots of games like this. Probably none of them, though, against an FCS team, I would imagine. So Iowa, to me, it just comes down to this question with Spencer Petras. Do they just have no one else at quarterback? Is there just no one else on the roster? And if the answer is yes, Aaron, why'd they put themselves in that situation?
Yep. Of course, all of this comes back to the coaches. Whatever the explanation is, it comes back to the coaches one way or another for continuing either to put him in that situation if there actually is somebody behind him, or if there's not, why didn't you recruit or develop somebody who could be a capable backup? Because what happens when he gets hurt? Did you ever plan for that? Just a couple of little tidbits. I believe it was 2000 or 2001 was the last time somebody scored just 7 points on a field goal and 2 safeties. That I think it was West Virginia versus Syracuse, and it was a bad loss for whoever scored the 7 points. And dating back to 1981, at least, that's all that I've heard of anyway. Dating back to 1981, there have been no teams who have scored 7 points that fashion and gone on to win the game. Iowa had 166 yards of offense, I think it was, -2 in turnovers, and they still won the game. And as an Iowa fan, part of me is like, how many teams in college football could win any game?
Yeah, if I were an Iowa fan, I'd be a little bit like suck it right now.
Yeah.
A little bit like that.
Who could win a game
That's
like
our brand.
that?
Yeah.
That's our brand.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm absolutely disgusted.
I'd be that too.
I went back because apparently I'm a masochist, and I watched every single offensive snap.
Oh, boy.
Every single offensive snap.
Show me your wrists.
Oh, man. And what's funny, I don't know what you kind of your takeaway was. I don't know how closely you watched the game. Yeah, the offensive line was bad. Last year, I was like, the offensive line is bad. That's why Spencer Petras is having so much trouble. Now I'm back to I've come full circle, or maybe half circle. I think it is Spencer Petras, because there were throws that he just has to make. Anybody earning a scholarship in college football, a quarterback scholarship in college football, has to be able to make those throws, and he just cannot for whatever reason. Offensive line was poor. I mean, you're down. Your injuries are terrible right now, but it took college football back like 100 years, that game, and it's just so frustrating to watch. And I will say one other thing. It's Iowa's scheme. It really is. And we can open up an entire can of worms, but the main thing rewatching every single offensive snap is that everything is so hard. It just looks so hard for this offense. And, I can't blame defenses. They just cheat all the time. And I'm not talking about penalties cheating. I'm talking about they're not even worried. They're not even worried.
Like cover zero, like every down, like a video game.
Basically, they're not even worried, because they know even if we get burnt, there's only like a 50 to 60% chance that he's going to be able to make a throw more than, maybe 20 to 25 yards down the field. because he airmails and ground mails a lot of passes that should just be made automatically. So that's my gripe. I'm sure I'll add this one thing as well. I'm sure by like the end of the first quarter, Phil Parker, the defensive coordinator, was like, these guys are not going to score a touchdown on us, so let's shut it all down. And I'll tell you why this actually probably makes it even worse, because that's just confirmation that Iowa's number one guys on offense couldn't even do any better than making the frickin' FCS. Now, it is a good FCS team. They have a lot of players.
They're a top 10 team.
They have a lot of players that would play in FBS. I don't know, start, but they made them look like the frickin' steel curtain. There's no excuse for that. No excuse for that at this level.
I think the quarterback situation is what it is, but we've seen Iowa win a lot of games with quarterbacks that are not that much better than what we've seen from Spencer Petras. What is maybe even more alarming, how can you not, given you're one of the offensive line factories of college football,
that's another thing.
How could you not just line up and run the ball down their throats? And even if it was still a boring, terrible game, but maybe it's 17-3 or something instead, how were you unable to do that?
That's a can of worms. I mean, we can get into that as well, but it is there. I think anyway, it's their blocking scheme. So Wisconsin, why does Wisconsin have so much more success year in and year out with their run game than Iowa has? And Iowa used to be known for that, but I think the reason the blocking scheme is just, it's what makes Iowa, it's what makes their best offensive linemen translate immediately into the NFL and be able to develop there very quickly and start there very quickly. It's the zone blocking scheme. At Wisconsin, it's the gap blocking scheme. And I'm not a huge X's and O's guy, but the latter is just so much more simple, so many fewer rules. And one of the things that the coaches said yesterday is that Iowa's offensive linemen were just overthinking it. And at this level, especially in an age of NIL and transfer portal, and you've got to develop guys like this and early entrance into the drafts, you're not getting guys that are sticking around for 4 years. You're not getting your best players sticking around for 4 years. So learning this offensive scheme, especially when it comes to blocking, just takes a long time to develop. So that's my hypothesis as to why they can't just line up and do 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
I want to go back to the season opener last year, Penn State at Wisconsin. And Penn State finds a way to beat Wisconsin at their own game on the road in the season opener in a raucous crowd there at Camp Randall. And if I would have told you on that day or the next episode of Bigger 10 shortly thereafter, Aaron, that Penn State team's going to end the year 7-6, you would have told me I'm crazy nuts. That's exactly what happened, right? So I want to say, hey, nice win. You go into, that's a rare sellout there at Ross 8. They were ready for you. And I know Purdue is minus its two best players from last year in Karlaftis and Bell, but they didn't have those guys. And basically a road game against Tennessee in the Music City Bowl. They won there. They brought pretty much everybody else on the team back, including the second team all Big Ten quarterback of a year ago. And you found a way to get it done there. And Clifford, after some scuffling, brilliantly leads a game-winning drive. You should get a lot out of that. But we just saw this a year ago, right? So, Aaron, make the case for me that this time, getting a nice win in a raucous environment on the road in the opener against a Big Ten West team of some repute, that this time it will be different than how last season turned out.
I can't right now. I'm not immediately discounting them. I honestly thought Purdue looked noticeably better for basically the entire game. Just a note on them. I don't remember much of Peyton Manning when he was with Indianapolis, or at least kind of the offense that they ran there. I remember Peyton Manning with the Broncos very well because it frustrated me to no end what he would do against. That's what it feels like watching Purdue, actually. You get a lot just, again, cliche, take what the defense gives you.
They scheme guys open.
Yep. Which frustrates the heck out of defenses. So credit to Penn State for actually getting enough stops on that offense, because it seemed like, if they were just patient enough, Purdue was basically moving the ball up and down the field at will. So I can't really make this case for Penn State, but that final drive, they must have driven that script into the ground in training camp, because it looked automatic. It looked like a completely different offense from what we saw for most of the night to that point. So it's a good win. You definitely needed that one, but I can't really make the case that this year's going to be any different than last year for Penn State.
Let's go to the defending Big Ten champions. Michigan opens up 51-7 against Colorado State. And there's going to be a ton of talk about the quarterback situation. We got into that here on the channel on this week's episode of Michigan Podcast in depth. So we would urge you to go ahead and watch that. Just in short, I think it's Jim Harbaugh is intentionally creating a scenario for J.J. McCarthy with his superior skill set to become the starting quarterback. But again, that's kind of the focus of this week's episode of Michigan Podcast. Let's talk about the other story, because everybody talked about, well, what are you going to do, replacing all those guys on defense? And really, we're talking about three guys. Pretty much the rest of the defense is back. Now, the problem is the three guys they lost were the names everybody knew. Okay, Aiden Hutchinson, Dax Hill, and then nobody knew what a David Ojabo was at this time last year, but he became a household name. Aiden and Ojabo had 25 of the team's 33 sacks. So it's a natural question to ask, hey, where is that production going to come from? How about 7 sacks from 6 different players, 11 tackles for loss from 9 different players? Every single scholarship player with eligibility on defense played, and even some walk-ons. So I understand it's just Colorado State, but if Michigan had only gotten like 2 sacks against Colorado State, that'd be a story too, right? Okay. So your thoughts on, the depth and athleticism that Michigan showed on that side of the ball, minus some guys that were big-time players a year ago on that championship team.
Yeah, I would be encouraged. This is basically what you were saying in the immediate aftermath of last season as well. It's like, well, we're bringing a lot of guys back, a lot of guys with playing experience that usually translates into some higher preseason expectations, which Michigan really didn't have this year. So I would be very encouraged if I were a Michigan fan. I think you did what you needed to do in this game. So, don't take too much, but don't discount the Colorado, the fact that you were playing Colorado State at all. I think you did what you were supposed to do against a team like that. I would expect a little bit more offensively. You guys did whatever you wanted to. I would just expect a little bit more polish offensively in the next 2 weeks, just based on who your opponents are. But I don't really think there's too much to glean from this, other than the fact that defense looks legit. I think all eyes will be on the quarterback, though, this coming Saturday. That's going to be the big question, obviously.
Well, let's close this out, Aaron, by putting all eyes, and I don't know if we've ever said that in the history of this show, all eyes on Rutgers. Because this was a nice win. This was a big win. This is one of the biggest non-conference wins that Rutgers has had, maybe since Greg Schiano was its coach before. On the road, and I know Boston College isn't great. That's still a very respectable ACC program. Jeff Hafley, the former Ohio State DC, is the head coach. You've got Phil Jurkovec, who may be a future NFL draft pick at quarterback. They've got players. Zay Flowers, maybe a future NFL wide receiver. That's not a bad football team. And they were bowl eligible last year and just couldn't play in the game because of COVID. You went on the road. A slew of injuries. In fact, when I saw Rutgers' injury report, I will confess, man, I jumped on my app. And I placed a not insignificant wager on Boston College in that game, which was a not insignificant loss. All right. That's a huge win for Rutgers, man. That is a huge win, and that's a culture win. That's an identity win. That's, you get into that, all those cliches that programs like Iowa and Michigan that you want to become like say all the time. Expectations are for the position, next man in, right? That, it was not fluky. That's just, we know who we are. We know what we're about. We got some guys out. We're going to play our style anyway. If you beat us, great. If not, fine. But we're not changing for you. I thought that was really an inspiring opener if you are a Rutgers fan.
Agreed. And I think we'd be saying the same thing about Illinois had they not tried their best to lose that game against Indiana,
which they did
as well, which they absolutely did. Both teams tried to. But hats off. I don't think I've ever said this. Hats off to Rutgers football, because, like you said, the biggest thing of, I think, what you just said is that it was not fluky. It was not like 7-3, 2 safeties, or 10 safeties and 3 field goals and a 1 point. It was not anything like that. They just came in there, they did their thing, and then they left. Very businesslike. Again, another cliche, but be very, very encouraged. That's because this is not a team this year that had basically any expectations. So if you can kind of steal a few games here and there, that's a very, very positive sign for them.
No, if it weren't for Indiana, that would have been the most depressing of the Big Ten of the BTN bus tour stops was Rutgers this year.
Yeah.
But that offensive line did its job. The young quarterbacks did their job. So huge win for the Fighting Greg Schianos. Well deserved. You ready to play some Would You Rather?
You bet.
All right, let's do that here when we come back. All right, let's play some Would You Rather here on Bigger 10. Aaron, this very first one is for you. Would you rather be the Iowa coaching staff trying to really reinstill confidence into Spencer Petras, or the Iowa State coaching staff trying to make sure Hunter Dekkers isn't too overconfident after a 4-touchdown, 42-point debut last week? Which coaching staff would you rather be heading into the Cyhawk game on Saturday?
Man, I would rather actually be the Iowa State staff. I think almost always, I would rather be kind of reining in the enthusiasm than trying to get guys going. I think it's a better sign. I think it's a better sign when you're trying to rein in enthusiasm rather than just trying, you can do it, buddy. Especially where we are. I mean, Petras, he's taken a lot of crap. A lot of it deserved, but he's taken a lot of crap, and he keeps getting back out there, and credit to him. But I just don't know where he is.
So quick follow up.
Yeah.
If you're reinstilling confidence into Spencer Petras, right? You're Brian Ferentz, the OC quarterback coach. You're saying to him, "Hey, remember when you did blank? You can do that. You showed you can do it. Do it again." What is that blank? Fill that in.
See, unlike previous last, I don't know. I could probably last 3 to 4 starting quarterbacks for Iowa. I cannot point to a game. Maybe Maryland last year.
Okay.
But that was not especially a great tactical passing attack. Maybe Maryland last year. But usually there's like Nate Stanley against Ohio State. CJ Beathard had a few games like that. Just going all the way back to middle of 2000s. I just don't know what that game is for Spencer Petras.
So Petras was good in the COVID year, but as we have learned, take nothing from the COVID year pretty much at all.
Yeah.
But that was his first year as the starter. Now, your forerunner in this chair opposite me, he and I used to argue about this for years, all right? My theory that Iowa quarterbacks, with the lone exception of Ricky Stanzi, tended to get worse the longer they played at Iowa. Spencer Petras is clearly a worse quarterback than he was his first year in 2020, right? Clearly.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that, for that trend not being a thing, it sure does seem to happen a lot.
Yeah. Next, this one's for you. Would you rather say that Michigan is a surefire lock right now for this college football playoff, or would you rather say that Iowa would be a legitimate CFP contender with an average offense?
That's a great question. Let's do this, all right? Cade McNamara is Iowa's starting quarterback. And J.J. McCarthy is Michigan's starting quarterback, because that's what I think Cade McNamara is. Great leader, but in terms of productivity, talent, better than average kind of college quarterback. Mm-hmm. So Cade McNamara is Iowa's starting quarterback. J.J. McCarthy is Michigan's. They play for the Big Ten championship. What do you think happens? I think that's how you would answer the question, right? Because McNamara is kind of the quarterback you're talking about, right?
Yeah, I think Michigan would still win. I just don't have faith in the system.
There's no way it's 42-3. Right?
No way it's 42-3. I don't think Iowa would win.
Now let's flip it around. J.J. McCarthy is Iowa's quarterback and Cade McNamara is. Yeah. So you still think even with as great of a front seven as Iowa has, right?
Yeah.
That you still have to have a playmaker at quarterback.
You have to have it. Yeah. I don't know why we just recruit statues or tell them put the fear of God in them about making mistakes. I don't know. You cannot be. I get that it's complimentary football. I understand that. But it has to be complimentary football. Like you have to do something on offense. You have to do something on offense. Is that too much to ask? I don't know.
Somewhere Kirk Ferentz is like, I won 10 games last year.
Yeah. Somehow.
All right, Aaron, would you rather your team was coached by Scott Frost or Clay Helton? If you were a Nebraska fan, I tried to come up with the ultimate I hate myself question here. The Huskers face Helton and Georgia Southern this week. That's what made me think about it.
Probably at this point, I'm going with Helton. I think I'm going for anything. I mean, I watched that Nebraska.
He's got a Pac-12 championship.
Yeah, I watched that Nebraska North Dakota game last week, and Nebraska, and I was watching with a Nebraska fan as well.
Oh boy.
And just the gnashing of teeth. It was like, this is not really happening. And it didn't happen, but.
So here's what we got for bringing Nebraska into our league. Since Nebraska came into our league, they got kicked out of the AAU. Right?
It's not bad. On a technicality.
Yeah, but they still got kicked out. Yeah. They got kicked out of the AAU, and their football program has completely and totally cratered. Straight up question. You're Jim Delaney. In fact, bonus, would you rather? You ready? Because I know you got one more to ask me.
Sure.
All right. Would you rather, if you're Jim Delaney, would you rather, if you had to do it all over again, invite Rutgers or Nebraska?
Nebraska. The brand is so much bigger.
Even with that, remember, it's 2011.
Yeah.
TV markets still matter. Or 2014. TV markets still matter. I don't know, man. I think Rutgers has been a better investment, actually. We played a Big Ten tournament at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
Rutgers has been a better investment. Anyway, dude, you want to talk about debates that'll make you self-harm?
Yeah.
That one. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Theme for this. Would you rather bet Georgia Southern plus 1,300 or Ohio plus 1,400 to win outright against Nebraska / Penn State?
Oh, I'd bet on Clay Helton. Yeah, because I'm fading.
I mean, they're not a slouch either.
No, I mean they used to be a great FCS program. I mean, there's a lot of tradition and culture there. But you're essentially asking me, would I rather fade James Franklin or Scott Frost? And I think James Franklin is overrated because of how open he is with the media, but he ain't what Scott Frost is at Nebraska. When I say James Franklin is overrated, I think like he's still like a top 30 coach.
Sure.
Okay. I think I'd rather fade Scott Frost than James Franklin.
Gotcha.
Although this is a absolute, I love my sandwich games. You know that, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of Big Ten teams this week, Aaron, that have serious sandwich spots. Michigan State at home against, who's the old Penn State OC that's the coach at Akron now? Moorhead, who did a great job at Penn State. They're playing the Fighting Joe Moorheads. They've got at Washington next week, classic sandwich game look-ahead spot. How about Penn State, even bigger sandwich spot, right? They come home after the big win against Purdue. They're at Auburn next week, and here come the fighting former Frank Soliches. A couple of, maybe sleepy little let's get out of here W spots for a couple of Big Ten teams that I might be fading in my picks this week, just by the spread anyway.
I think I might put like $5 money line on either one of those.
All right, we'll come back. Let's wrap things up here in a bit. This week's Twitter poll results. What was the biggest surprise of week 1? Iowa struggling with an FCS foe was the overwhelming top choice at 45.6%. 27.7% voted for Rutgers win at BC. That was mine because my account at William Caesars was also surprised by that. 26.6% of you having Ohio State, quote, struggling with Notre Dame. They still beat a top 5 team by double digits, but that's struggling in today's point spread world. This week's feedback of the week comes from Iowa Cognito in response to me tweeting out, everybody knows Iowa is still beating Iowa State next week, right? He says, I don't know how or why, but yes, my faith in Matt Campbell's ability to blow it against Iowa is strong. So, Aaron, I'm a Matt Campbell fanboy, right? Yeah. I'd have been totally fine if we had to run Harbaugh after 2020 and he was the next coach. I think he's a generational type of coaching talent. You have to understand intimately what the Iowa State program has historically been up against. And as someone who used to cover it for a living, I do, right? He's done everything you could ask an Iowa State coach to realistically do, but one thing, beat Iowa. And here's the thing. They have lost to Iowa in every conceivable fashion. Shootouts, rock fights, fumbled punts. We double Iowa in yards per play, but throw 75 interceptions. Every way you could think of to lose, they have lost to Iowa, which is why I don't think you can bet Iowa State until you actually see them beat Iowa on the field.
I don't have a problem with that last part. I mean, this is nitpicking, but I don't really think Iowa State has lost to Iowa in every conceivable way.
Oh, by 2 safeties and a field goal.
What?
Is that?
Well
I thought you were going to say that.
No,
I wasn't trying to troll you. I wasn't. I thought
No,
you were going to do that.
I should have.
Yeah.
Literally out. The first matchup, which I was at, that Matt Campbell just got his doors blown off. Their first matchup in Iowa City. Other than that, every single Iowa State game since then has been one problem. And it's not a Matt Campbell thing. Terribly timed, terrible turnovers from Iowa State. Every single game. Every single game. So I think that's the main thing. Don't turn it over. Don't turn it over, and you'll have a shot at the end if you're Iowa State.
Easier said than done against A, the way Iowa plays defense, but B, you're going on the road with a gunslinger, a young quarterback, Iowa kid, eager to prove himself. I don't know. I can see maybe a Riley Moss pick 6 in there somewhere along the line, perhaps.
Might be the only touchdown we score all day.
Oh my gosh.
10 to 6.
2 safeties, a field goal, and a touchdown for 14-6.
Yep.
All right, great stuff as always. We will be back again next week here on Bigger 10. We'll have our confidence picks coming your way on the channel here tomorrow as well. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Bigger 10, especially on game days. We have a lot of scorching hot, which means terrible takes for you in real time. You do not want to miss or mock. You can also like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, share, follow, etc. However you watch or wherever you listen, whether it's you watch on iTunes or watch on YouTube, I should say, or listen on iTunes. We appreciate all of you. Please help us to find more Big Ten sports fans just like you. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Dace. We'll see you next week right here on Bigger 10.